Ever since my husband and I moved into our dream home in Maple Glen Estates, we thought we'd finally found peace. Quiet streets, manicured lawns, friendly neighbors, or so we thought. That illusion shattered the moment we met Karen Baginski, or as she proudly introduced herself, Vice President of the HOA and Protector of Neighborhood Standards. Karen was always watching. She knew exactly how long your garbage bin sat outside. She counted how many guests you had over and took pictures of packages left on your porch. If your grass was a half-inch too tall, you'd get a letter, printed, in triplicate, and hand-delivered with a smile so fake it could peel paint. My husband and I kept to ourselves, followed every silly HOA rule, and avoided confrontation. We weren't here to make enemies. But that didn't matter to Karen. We were new. We were different. And for some reason, she didn't like that. At first, it was minor stuff. A note about our porch light being too bright. A complaint about our welcome mat being unapproved material. Then she started leaving messages on the neighborhood Facebook group hinting that certain new residents weren't respecting community standards. People knew who she meant. Then came the week everything spiraled. One night, we returned home to find our front door slightly ajar. Nothing looked stolen, but the house had clearly been disturbed. Drawers opened. Cushions tossed. Someone had broken in. We called the police. They arrived quickly, took notes, and promised to look into it. But we had no cameras and no solid leads. The very next day, Karen marched right over. Hands on hips. Smile plastered on. "So sorry to hear about the break-in," she said. "But you know, I always say, maybe if you'd invested in a proper security system like the HOA recommends." I stared at her. She didn't seem concerned. If anything, she looked amused. That night, my husband reviewed our doorbell cam footage. Not of the break-in, they entered from the back, but of the street from earlier that day. What we saw made my blood run cold. Karen. Walking around our yard hours before we arrived home. She wasn't delivering a letter. She was looking through windows. And she had gloves on. Something wasn't right. And I was going to find out exactly what she was up to. The morning after the election, the neighborhood buzzed. Some clapped politely when they passed Fuck on his early walk, while others kept their distance, suspicious smiles plastered on their faces. The HOA board, used to wielding power like a private club, suddenly found themselves under scrutiny. Karen, the dethroned queen bee of the HOA, wasn't taking it well. She had expected Fuck to be a bumbling figurehead, easy to manipulate, someone she could blame when things inevitably went wrong. But instead, Fuck held meetings that started on time, reviewed budgets line by line, and asked questions that made even longtime board members sweat. At a private meeting in Karen's kitchen, the old guard gathered, sipping Chardonnay and complaining. "He's up to something," Karen hissed. "You don't just appear out of nowhere, win an election by a landslide, and then actually know what you're doing." "He's too calm," added Margaret, the HOA treasurer. "And he asked to see our expense reports going back 5 years. Do you know what that means?" Karen narrowed her eyes. "He's looking for dirt." Across the street, Fuck watched the blinds twitch from his study window. He could almost hear them plotting. Not that it mattered. The truth was, Fuck knew everything already. He had quietly donated to the neighborhood fund under different aliases, fixed potholes before the HOA could get around to it, and even paid the overdue bills on the HOA's behalf, discreetly, of course. He didn't need credit. He needed control. Because in a neighborhood where appearance meant everything, Fuck had discovered something much darker under the surface: money laundering through fake vendor contracts, insider favoritism, and missing reserve funds. That night, he sat in his sleek, minimalist home office, nothing like the modest front his neighbors saw, and clicked open a folder labeled, HOA Truth. Dozens of documents, call logs, and invoices lined the screen. He smiled. Time to clean house. The HOA boardroom buzzed with tension as Karen took her seat at the far end of the long oak table. The same people who had once nodded politely at her in community picnics now sat across from her with stiff posture and pursed lips. "I called this meeting," Karen began confidently, "because I have serious concerns about the leadership of this HOA." A low murmur swept across the room. Linda, the current board president, narrowed her eyes. "Karen, you're not even an official member of the board." "Not yet," Karen said, producing a thick binder from her tote. "But according to Section 4.2 of the HOA bylaws, any resident who collects signatures from 25% of homeowners can call for a board restructuring vote." Linda's expression cracked for a moment. "You went door to door?" Karen nodded. "And not just for signatures. I also collected stories." She flipped open the binder. Noise complaints ignored. Favoritism in lawn citations. Mysterious invoices for park maintenance that don't match the contractor's records. She slid photocopies across the table like playing cards. The board members glanced at one another. Karen had done her homework. One member, Jacob, cleared his throat. "Linda, is this true?" Linda scoffed. "You're going to believe this? She's just stirring drama." But the tide was shifting. Karen leaned forward. "What I want is transparency. Equal enforcement. And accountability. If you don't think I'm capable, fine. Let the neighborhood vote. But this HOA isn't your kingdom." The room went silent. Outside the building, Fuck stood in the parking lot, pacing. He wasn't supposed to be involved, but he knew what Karen was doing. And he knew it wasn't the whole truth. Karen exited the room minutes later with a smug smile. Phase 1, complete. Fuck approached cautiously. "You're really doing it?" Karen looked at him, a glint of ambition in her eyes. "You think I'd dig up all this dirt and not use it? But at what cost?" he asked. Karen paused, then laughed softly. "Fookbaggy, you still believe in heroes. I believe in leverage." As she walked away, Fuck stared after her, uneasy. He hadn't told her, but he'd discovered something else, something she didn't expect anyone to know. And if Karen wasn't careful, her rise to power might be shorter than she thought. Karen's web of lies was spinning tighter and tighter, and it seemed like no one in the neighborhood suspected a thing. Her carefully crafted act of disability earned her sympathy, special parking spots, and priority treatment at HOA meetings. But the more privileges she enjoyed, the more reckless her behavior became. Neighbors began to notice inconsistencies. Mrs. Thompson saw Karen jogging casually in the park one afternoon, far from the crippled persona she put on at meetings. Mr. Ramirez spotted her carrying heavy boxes into her home without any sign of difficulty. Rumors started to spread, whispers behind closed doors about Karen's true condition. One day, a concerned neighbor, Mr. Lee, decided to take action. He discreetly filmed Karen dancing energetically at a family barbecue, far from the wheelchair and crutches she used in public. The video quickly made its way to the HOA board members. At the next HOA meeting, tensions ran high. Mr. Lee presented the video as evidence of Karen's deception. Karen was caught off guard and flustered, her face flushing red. The room fell silent as everyone processed the betrayal. The HOA board had to act. They called for an investigation and suspended Karen's privileges pending the outcome. The once powerful Karen found herself isolated and facing the consequences of her actions. Karen's mask was shattered, and the community felt betrayed. Many who once sympathized with her now saw the true face behind the act. It was a harsh lesson about honesty and integrity, and a warning to anyone tempted to exploit the system. Despite the fallout, Karen was not ready to give up. She vowed to fight back, determined to reclaim her place in the neighborhood, but this time, the stakes were higher than ever. The neighborhood was buzzing more than ever. After weeks of rumors and whispers, the HOA board finally called an emergency meeting to address the controversy that had shaken their tight-knit community. Everyone knew the truth about Karen's fake disability act was out, but what would come next? Karen sat rigidly in her chair, trying to maintain her usual facade of superiority and innocence. But the tension in the room was thick. The once admiring neighbors now looked at her with suspicion and disappointment. Mr. Thompson, the HOA president, cleared his throat and began, "We've reviewed all the evidence. Video footage, witness statements, and medical reports all confirm that Karen's claims were fabricated. This is a serious violation of community trust and ethics." Gasps and murmurs filled the room. Karen's eyes darted around, searching for an ally, but everyone kept their distance. Mrs. Rodriguez, an elderly neighbor who had once befriended Karen, stood up, voice trembling but firm. "I believed in you, Karen. I defended you when others doubted. But this deception hurts all of us, especially those who truly need these accommodations." Tears welled up in Karen's eyes, but they were not of remorse. It was anger at being exposed, at losing control. The HOA board voted unanimously to revoke all special privileges Karen had received. They also imposed a fine for the emotional and administrative damages caused. But the real punishment was social. Karen found herself isolated, shunned by neighbors who once smiled and greeted her warmly. Her attempts to explain herself only made matters worse, as no one wanted to hear more lies. In the following weeks, Karen's carefully crafted image crumbled. Her story was shared beyond the neighborhood, warning others about the dangers of deceit and entitlement. Yet, amid the fallout, a lesson emerged: true respect and privilege come from honesty and integrity, not manipulation. As Karen faced the consequences of her actions, the neighborhood slowly healed, stronger and more united than before, a community that had learned the importance of trust and the cost of betrayal.